everybody was throwing out names, and they were all awful. So my favorite was the mythical, ethical, icicle, tricycle. And Jerry came over to my house one day and he said, "Okay, let's find a name." So we started sitting down, and I had a bunch of reference books. We went through the encyclopedia and Bartlett's quotations, and looking for maybe some cool line from Shakespeare or something we could use. And Jerry just picks up this old dictionary that my girlfriend just happened to have around. It was her grandmother's, and he picked it up and he just opened it, and the book fell open, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey man, how about the Grateful Dead?" I just jumped up and down because that was it.
While volunteering at a local radio station, a young trumpet player attending the University of Berkeley would meet an aspiring banjo player. Later, the banjo player would invite the trumpet player to play bass in his band. The trumpet player, having never played bass before, said yes, and a long, strange trip began. The Grateful Dead played music for a dedicated 30 years. Incredible instrumentalists, songwriters, and singers have played music in the band, but there has always been the foundation keeping the sound together. The bassist of the band with a background in classical music. Let's talk about Phil Lesh. Phil Lesh was born in Berkeley, California on March 15, 1940. For my astrologically inclined friends, that means Phil is a Pisces, or Phil is a fish. Phil was the only child of Frank Lesh and Barbara Chapman. Frank Lesh was a piano player who encouraged Phil to take up music. Phil would join his school's marching band, starting on the violin and eventually move over to trumpet. Phil would get into classical music and experimental jazz from this point on, always being interested in avant-garde music in particular. Phil Lesh would also begin studying to learn how to be a composer. It was while attending Berkeley University of California that Phil Lesh would volunteer as a recording engineer for the radio station KPFA and meet the banjo player Jerry Garcia. Now, in 1965, Jerry Garcia would invite Phil Lesh to play bass for his band, the Warlocks. Once again, Phil Lesh never played bass before joining the Grateful Dead. While he was classically trained in violin and trumpet, he wasn't a bass player. He was actually learning how to play bass on the job, which led to a lot of innovation and a completely different approach to bass. Getting back to the Warlocks. So, the Warlocks unknowingly shared a name with another legendary band around this area, the Velvet Underground. Both bands ultimately changed their name, with Jerry Garcia picking the name The Grateful Dead out of a book. Now, the Grateful Dead was originally formed with Jerry Garcia and started out as a jug band. Once again, Jerry Garcia played banjo early on. He was really into folk music and traditional Americana music, so jug band was perfect. Eventually, they would move towards that psychedelic sound that the Grateful Dead got to be known for, after listening to the Beatles and after listening to Bob Dylan's songs where he begins working as an electric musician. The band, the Grateful Dead, already had all of its other original members. Of course, there's Jerry Garcia, who I've mentioned a few times. There was Bob Weir, the youngest of the group, Pigpen, who was the original frontman, one of the best singers, and also the keyboard and harmonica player, as well as the drummer, Bill Kretzmann. With Phil Lesh, the Grateful Dead would begin. Phil Lesh was constantly a driving force for the sound of the Grateful Dead. Armed with classical knowledge, trained in the musical background, and using the aptly named bass, Mission Control, Phil Lesh would keep the Grateful Dead on course while they sailed through a sea of experimental and psychedelic music. Phil Lesh's bass playing, however, was breaking grounds. He would often use a 6-string bass, and his approach to playing bass was different than your traditional bass player. He didn't play the root note and the 5th note often. He would work the bass using a mentality that was based off of Bach's counterpoints. So basically, he used the bass to construct alternate melodies that were complementing Jerry Garcia's playing, blending the bass playing of Phil Lesh to begin sounding like a completely new lead instrument. Phil Lesh would also say he was influenced by bassists around that time, like the Jefferson Airplane's bassist Jack Cassidy, as well as a wide variety of other musicians. Some of the Grateful Dead's earliest shows took place at Ken Kesey's acid tests, where the band would become ingrained with another pivotal part of their music, the use of LSD. Phil Lesh would say about LSD, "We found that while high, we were able to go very far out musically, but still come back to a recognizable space of song structure." If you listen to a lot of the Grateful Dead's music, especially the live music, they can go off in so many different directions, but all together, like a flock of birds flying north or migrating, they would come back and land in the musical space, sometimes in a new song, sometimes in the same song. I knew instantly that this combination, acid and music, was the tool I'd been looking for. Phil Lesh wouldn't take on the role of lead singer for many of the Grateful Dead songs. He would often contribute to the band's early harmonies and co-wrote much of the music. St. Stephen, The 11, and Dark Star are all co-written by Phil Lesh, for example. He did take on the lead singing role for the song Box of Rain. Lesh would actually play acoustic guitar and sing on this song. It was written by Robert Hunter for Phil Lesh's father, who was dying at that time. He had prostate cancer. Phil Lesh also worked heavily with Owsley Bear Stanley in designing the Wall of Sound. This system was 40 feet high, contained 604 speakers, and required 26,400 watts of power to operate. Lesh would describe using the system as piloting a flying saucer or writing your own sound wave. The Wall of Sound got its first public use on March 23, 1974, at Cow Palace in San Francisco. After Jerry Garcia died in 1995, Phil Lesh would continue making music with a variety of groups, often including other surviving members of the Grateful Dead. He founded Terrapin Crossroads in 2012, located in San Rafael, California, and would play there with his two sons. Phil Lesh had a number of health concerns, and after needing a liver transplant in 1998, began advocating for organ donation. On October 26 of 2006, Lesh publicly announced that he was having surgery for prostate cancer. The surgery was a success, but he needed another surgery in 2015 for bladder cancer. Phil Lesh would die on October 25, 2024, at the age of 84. And with the death of Phil Lesh, we have lost another outstanding member of the Grateful Dead. His bass playing was very unique and very inspired, and he was absolutely pivotal and essential for the sound of the Grateful Dead. With that, I will leave you folks. My name is Richard Durazo. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, leave a like, let me know what you think. I often post the pure unedited video on my Patreon. If you want to support me, please go and join my Patreon. I do a lot of different sound clips and it might get taken down. If YouTube strikes it, I cut it out. Otherwise, thank you so much, many blessings, and have a great day.